If I can just be perfect, I will be lovable. I will be worthy. I will be accepted, and I will be enough. Or so I thought. So why then, when I reached my career goal and I was in training to become an Air Force oral maxillofacial surgeon, did I feel so freaking empty? I prided myself on being a perfectionist. I wore it like a badge of honor. It was a huge part of my identity. Who wouldn't want to be called a perfectionist? In Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown, she says, perfectionism is a self-destructive and addictive belief system that fuels this primary thought. If I look perfect, live perfectly, work perfectly, and do everything perfectly, I can avoid or minimize the feelings of shame, judgment, and blame. This creates quite a vicious cycle. Shame is created in the gap between where we think we need to be and where we perceive we are. If we're striving for this unattainable level of perfection and we see ourselves as unlovable, unworthy, and all the things, that gap of shame will persist. And that's why shame and perfectionism become a vicious cycle. If I can just achieve more, be more perfect, I will be lovable. I will be worthy. I will be enough. It's a lie. Brene Brown differentiates perfectionism from healthy striving. Perfectionism is the concept of how we're perceived by other people. We strive for it. We want it. How the heck would you define it? We can't get it. For people who love success, we're setting ourselves up for failure over and over and over again. Why do we do that? It's hard to look at. It's taken me years to peel back the layers. A lot of it can still be subconscious. Many of us are living with toxic shame. Toxic shame that developed in childhood, adolescence, or somewhere in our life, where we develop this pervasive feeling of feeling unworthy, unlovable, not enough. In childhood, it often stems from trauma of not getting what you needed physically or emotionally, or being abused physically, emotionally, or sexually. Because when we're children, we have a hard time projecting that other people are the problem, especially when we depend on them to take care of us. So we internalize, I must be the problem. Because when we internalize that we are the problem, that it gives us something that we can fix. If we were to identify that the problem exists outside of us, especially in our caretakers, that would be a threat to our survival. And it's really challenging. For me, there's been this cognitive dissonance. I want to feel grateful and appreciative for the privilege I've been given and also recognized what I wasn't. That sense of being seen on deep levels, supported emotionally, unconditionally loved for who I truly am. Instead, I tried to gain love through achievements, through just being perfect. If I could just be perfect, I could reduce the conflict. If I could just be perfect, I will be seen. If I can just be perfect, I will be loved. If I can just be perfect, I will be worthy. I chased achievements in order to fill that void. And for aspects of my life, it did, for fleeting moments. The more and more I achieved, the more and more I was who society told me I needed to be in order to feel worthy, valuable, loved. The more I abandoned my true self, the more empty I felt inside. The more I was telling myself, those parts of you are not lovable. Those parts of me, that highly sensitive self that was told I was too sensitive, that person who asked for boundaries over my physical appearance, someone who nearly died from anorexia that just asked, please don't talk about our bodies, please don't talk about mine, whose boundaries were constantly crossed, that said, your needs don't matter. Toxic shame led me to believe that was true. And I people pleased in order to be that good girl, be who I thought I needed to be accepted. What I did was I abandoned myself more and more, completely losing myself along the way. Toxic shame keeps us from living a life that's true to us. It keeps us from seeing that we are worthy of setting boundaries, that we are worthy of living in alignment with what matters to us, that our opinion matters. Perfectionism seems like a way out, especially when it's championed in society. But again, let's read Brené Brown's words. Perfectionism is a self-destructive and addictive belief system that fuels this primary thought. If I look perfect, live perfectly, work perfectly, and do everything perfectly, I can avoid or minimize the painful feelings of shame, judgment, and blame. I've been immersed in the high achievement culture long enough to know that many of us are feeling these deep layers of not enoughness. Many of us are yearning and craving for deeper connection with people. So many people come from shame-based cultures. They become who they thought they needed to be in order to be accepted by their culture. And when trying to heal from shame, they might be trying to ask for what they need from the people who love them, but aren't able to provide them that because they also weren't given what they needed. Shame is transmissible. When I was exploring this toxic shame, I developed so much anger. And actually, it was the first time I could truly honor my anger and see that I was wronged, but also appreciate the people in my life were providing me the best that they could. And unconditional love doesn't mean unconditional tolerance. Just because we can justify and understand the why doesn't mean we have to keep tolerating it. So when we look back and try to understand, why did I develop this pain of unworthiness, of being unlovable, of not enough? I anticipate a lot of deep emotions will come up. For me, the beginning stages of anger I projected on the people that I thought harmed me, only causing more harm to the other people. Underneath all that anger was hurt and grief and pain of shouldering the burden of the lies of shame for so long. Knowing that that never enoughness was the threat to my existence as I had become suicidal and hospitalized for medical complications from anorexia. And I was blamed for that, shamed for that. Lost my military career, which at the time was my everything. I perceived things would have gone much differently for me, my military appeal, If I knew I was enough and I was worthy, I would have fought harder to reduce mental health stigma that is perpetuating shame and only worsening mental health for our military members and all. I would have advocated harder for us to reduce mental health stigma and see that the shame of the stigma was actually only perpetuating mental health distress. I'll create a separate video on that. For this video, I hope the main takeaway you have is understanding perfectionism is not the solution for the healing of that deep pain inside, a feeling unlovable, unworthy, not enough. Perfectionism sustains that gap between who you think you need to be and who you are. The more we can meet you where you are and know that where you are is lovable, is worthy, is enough. Unfortunately, in your life, you weren't given what you needed to know that. You may have been given a lot. You might feel privileged, but you might have experienced traumas that led you to this deep-rooted toxic shame. Now it's time to heal, to truly see that you have been worthy, you have been lovable, and you have been enough all along. It might be really hard to believe that right now. And I'm here to support you, to meet you where you're at your pace, to shine the light on shame, because shame thrives in secrecy, in judgment, in silence. Through connecting here together today, we might reduce that shame. I hope you might feel supported. I hope you might feel that I'm here with compassion, with curiosity, with non-judgment, with someone who also has experienced that deep-rooted pain, who is healing as well. In order to sit with this deep-rooted pain of shame, I personally have found self-compassion to be hugely beneficial. Brené Brown also talks about that in the Atlas of the Heart as really important in processing through shame. So I'm going to post down below Kristin Neff's self-compassion resources. I also find it very important to have a community. And I hope you know this A Life True to You community is here for you. But also finding people who provide you a sense of safety, of love that's unconditional, where you feel safe to be fully you and to process these deep pains in a way that allows you to process through. I've made the mistake of trying to get healing and talk about what I was ashamed of with people who further shame me. So though the antidote to shame is talking about it with people and shining a light, the risk of talking about it with people who are not willing to address their shame, to change, or to see you, is a risk of being further shamed. Brené Brown shares a lot about vulnerability. She talks about vulnerability with boundaries. So be intentional who you share it with, while also knowing that shame thrives in secrecy. So what is the best next step for you? What support do you need? Where are you at on your healing journey? I don't want to push you in the deep end, because I've tried that for myself before. And I know this type of healing needs pacing. It often needs professional support in modalities that honor and respect the impacts of trauma, and not only the mind, but of the body, the soul, and the spirit. So what kind of support do you need in order to process through all these topics safely in a way that aligns with what matters most to you? So thank you for being here in this community, talking about the things that aren't always fun, but allow us to truly embrace who we fully are so that we can live a deeply meaningful life that's true to ourselves. I'm so glad you're here.